This is a video response to a commenter on my channel, Mark Shipper, who asked a question about running Fantasy Flight Games' new release in their new series on the End of the World. He's talking about the Zombie Apocalypse, their first release in that series. He wants to run that, but this will be his first time game mastering, which I think is cool. And I also think it's cool that you can go online now and communicate with people all over the world to get feedback on what it is that you're doing. So I've responded to him in the comments, but I thought other people might have advice that they would want to share. And so this is kind of like a tag video, but it's a tag video response to somebody else video. So here's the situation. He's got a group of people. They've not played before, and he's not game mastered before, and he wants to make a good impression and start a group. And my first advice to him was, it's a leap of faith. Enjoy it. Your enthusiasm will be infectious. Go for it. Follow the advice given in the game. I find that Fantasy Flight Games have very beginner-friendly books, but at the same time, this is kind of a horror-themed game, and that's not always easy. What can we tell Mark Shipper? When he replied to my initial comment, he asked, how should I basically set up the game? Here's the question. I intend to run the game with them this weekend. The one-shot scenario is a story about a virus taking hold of a cruise ship. Would it be worth planning a timeline of the infection and its stages, or is that being too detailed? At the moment, I've planned a number of NPC characters, an intro, an Act 1 where the virus is introduced, and an Act 2 where another large event is introduced to the story. I was thinking the ship runs aground on an island. Should I also plan an ending, or let the players lead the story ending? So there's lots of thoughts going on, and he's got 5 days, I guess, 4 days to get ready to run. Well, here's my advice. If you're dealing with an infection and you're dealing with a closed environment like a cruise ship, it will be helpful, in my opinion, for the game master to know what will happen with this infection if nobody does anything. Right? At what speed would it realistically spread through the crew, through the passengers, and what effects would be noticeable as that happens? Right? What are the stages of infection? What is the rate of infection, and how virulent is it? How quickly will it spread through the crew? Is it passed, on glassware or doorknobs? Does it require to actually be bitten or come in contact with bodily fluids? That sort of thing. Know at what rate it's going to spread and how horrific it's going to be. But the whole point of play, from my perspective, is to discover what happens. So while the player's focus is going to be on their characters and what they experience as they move through the ship, or as they hole up and try to hide, or whatever it is that they try to do, life aboard the ship will continue. So knowing in general what the flow of events would reasonably be if nobody intervenes can help you feel confident in deciding what happens wherever your players go within that closed environment of the ship. But if your players are not running characters who are crew members, then the question is going to come up, why aren't the crew doing anything? Or what is the crew doing? Or, they want to go and get the crew to help them or do things for them. And that brings about a situation that you'll have to decide before play starts. Do you want to have well-prepared NPC characters of different types for them to interact with believably, who have some kind of area of responsibility, like the doctor, the engineer, the navigator, the pilot, etc.? Or do you intend to have the crew be removed by the infection first? This is part of your setup. What kind of setup are you creating for the characters? One where they are the only proactive group. Everyone else is like cattle or has been taken out by the infection. Or are there going to be groups of proactive groups within the population trapped on this ship? I would know that before you start. And if the idea is for the characters to be proactive, if you want them to enjoy the ability to act in this kind of zombie apocalypse scenario, how can that happen? Right? If you're going to introduce an environmental disaster like the ship running aground, is this something that they can interact with and prevent, and therefore feel like heroes, or is that beyond their control, but opens up an avenue of potential escape? Right? Because the ship has run aground, now there's somewhere for them to go to get off the ship, and they have to contain the infection on board the ship. Everything needs to have, it has to tie back into possibilities for action. When you design in a vacuum before play starts, you can make what I consider as an error of planning an end. The characters will do this, and then they will do this, and that will lead to this. And it's rarely the case. And when it is the case, it's not often that satisfying. But understanding the environment, understanding the people aboard the ship, understanding the nature of the infection, gives you the information you will need to make decisions as things are happening, to decide in play what is a reasonable response to an action, or what's the next stage in the case of inaction. And then I would advise figuring out ways to give your players information. Now, part of this will just be transmitting the atmosphere. What's it like on board this ship as more and more people get infected? What do they hear? What do the characters hear? What do the characters smell? What do they find on the deck? Are doors open or closed? As people get sick, do they hole up and hide away? Are they coming out? Do they need to get air? Are people sweating? What smells? What sights? What stains are left behind? Are door handles slippery to the touch? This kind of thing. Fill the ship with sounds and smells and textures and touches, and maybe smells so thick that it's almost a taste. Remember the sea air, the salt air, and the difference between being out on the deck in the wind and under deck, right? How does the throbbing of the engine sound and feel, and does the engine stop? And these sorts of things. Just that can be enough to provide the players with enough information to bring their characters into action. I don't like the way that sound smells, feels. So I'm not going to go in that direction. I'm going to go in another direction. Well, what do they see as they go in that direction? It keeps them moving, keeps them in motion. Even if they hole up, the description of things that are going on outside their hiding space will eventually bring some sort of action, whether it be dialogue and interaction, or a desire to get out of this place and into a better place. Lifeboats. What happens when the engine stops? Where do they go? Are they proactive? Do they go up to the bridge to find out what's going on, or do they leave the ship? Do they get fire axes and start, killing zombies? Who knows? And it's the excitement of not knowing before play that keeps me playing. I love to see the interaction between characters. I love to see the realization in a player's eyes as they start to get into the scene and realize that they are empowered to act and react and act again. And those are my tips. If anyone else has tips for Mark before the week ends, perhaps he'd appreciate them, especially if you have experience with this particular game and how its system interacts, whatever challenges he might experience with it. And anyway, good luck with your game, Mark. I think it's fantastic that you're getting into game mastering, and I hope it goes well, and I really hope that you will leave a comment to let us know how it went.